So why are we here again? We're here again challenging the rights of LGBTQ plus people and youth because, again, we are using, or not we, but the religion and religious people are using a loophole of freedom of speech that is represented in our Constitution to constitute as inflicting harm against minor children. So what this woman is arguing is that her freedom of speech for religious concerns are being prosecuted and confined because she wants to be able to use her religious speak, her religious voice, her religious text and doctrine to convert voluntary minor children from their natural sexual orientation to an unnatural sexual orientation in themselves. So basically she wants to be able to use her religious doctrine in her medical practices to convert children voluntarily. But let's talk about what this word voluntarily means, because voluntary consent does not exist. She claims that Chiles claims that children can volunteer themselves for conversion therapy. That is not true. Children cannot give consent, especially to actions and practices that they don't know can harm them and cause trauma to them in the future, in their future adult lives. They cannot consent. Hence why children cannot consent, and the age of consent for sex is 18 years old, because they cannot consent to something that could cause trauma to them in their adult lives. Their brains are not fully developed. Their brains are not fully functioning to a capacity to make decisions for themselves, especially when they're not given informed consent of all the possible disadvantages that this therapy can take place and exude when it comes to their later years of formative life. So minors can't give informed consent, and voluntary is a word that should not be used when it comes to children, and specific practices, including practices that can constitute as abuse, they cannot volunteer themselves, and they cannot give consent. So it's over and over again sold and told that courts and medical ethics both recognize that protecting minors overrides claims of consent in harmful practices. So again, right here, right now, her argument is deemed unethical because children cannot give consent. Children cannot volunteer for conversion therapy. That's why there is age of consent. That's why there's a coming of age when it comes to certain specifics like sex, like guns. These are impactful moments in lives that could affect children. So that's why there is an age of consent. So now I want to talk about another part of her argument. She claims that her ethical practice is inflicting upon and infringing upon her personal religious practice. I want to be very clear about something here. Very, very clear. The law does not ban faith or religion. The law cannot ban faith and religion. It's protected under the First Amendment, but it does ban harmful conduct under the license of therapy. And using your religious doctrine that has no scientific facts, no scientific background, and has a overwhelmingly negative connotation as well as actual conclusions to conversion therapy, to utilize that as your religious belief and cloak it under your being persecuted from your First Amendment right to preach those beliefs to children who volunteer but cannot volunteer to those practices is harmful. It's harmful. It's harmful conduct. So that's why there are strict guidelines when it comes to the religion and regulation. That's why there's a separation of church and state. That's why there's a separation between religion and medical practices. Because in religion, there's no factual basis for their claims. It's all based on intuition and faith, and you cannot argue with me on that. But when it comes to medical practices and therapy, there is case studies that provide evidence and conclusions that conversion therapy, or reparative therapy, as they want to call it now, is harmful to kids, especially because it is traumatic. So we have to draw the line where religious expression conflates with professional therapeutic practice. They don't go together. One is based off facts and conclusions and case studies and evidence. One is based on intuition and a book that has been rewritten 42,000 times by men who look to oppress certain communities. Let's dictate the facts here. Who are we going to believe? Medical professionals with scientific experience, facts, and conclusions, or a mythical book that can't be verified to any extent, as well as it has thoughts of oppression and practices of oppression throughout it? Let's bring the logic here. Anyway, so when we go on and continue to the overwhelming conclusions, every credible health organization, such as the APA, AMA, and WHO, condemns conversion therapy as unsafe. Religion is a base belief. Therapy is evidence-based. So this is what I just said as well, but I want to make it 100% clear that it is our federal government's job. It is our state's job. It's our local government's job. It's our police's job. As well as right now, the ball is in our Supreme Court. It's their job to defend and protect children right now. Because now we have religious insanity trying to infiltrate the option and give the option to them to harm children through proven conversion therapy that causes trauma. You want to protect children? Then let's protect children and avoid and ban conversion therapy. In 20 states now, conversion therapy is considered harmful. We should take the ideologies of these 20 states and the laws of these 20 states and apply them federally. So, Supreme Court, the ball is in your court to make the correct decision on this one. So, she also claims Kaylee Chiles also claims that her freedom of speech her freedom of speech is being infringed upon. But her speech isn't silenced. She has every right. Chiles has every right to practice her religion privately. But she has no right when it comes to medical practices to infringe on some innocent child's mind that they are not natural. They are not supposed to exist in the capacity that comes natural to them. There is absolutely no way that I would let my child sit in a therapist's office and be told that their natural being is not natural in existence. There's no way. But, when it comes to religion, they choose and cloak their religious faith and empathy and compassion for harm. They disguise it as harm. So, when you're a licensed professional, your speech is regulated as part of your conduct. That's why there's ethics boards. That's why there's rules and regulations. That's why there's case studies. That's why there's so many avenues that help protect not only the patients, but the doctor, the physician in these capacities. Because when you mix intuition and disinformation and mythical beings with actual facts, logic, and case studies, it creates a volatile source of disinformation that can provide a really, really toxic environment when it comes to now, say, conversion therapy. Because there is no proof that conversion therapy helps, but there is substantiated proof that conversion therapy does more harm and trauma.